Hey everyone. This is a very special episode of whatever the hell this series is called. Me ranting about books, I guess. This is my first episode while on the road. Up to now, everything I've recorded has been from my desk at home, or occasionally while curled up on the couch. However, right now I'm in LA, house sitting and dog sitting for friends. And like a loser, I actually did pack my microphone with me for this trip, just in case I finished my book while I'm here. Way back, before I uploaded my first video, I tried using my cell phone as a microphone, but the recording was just horrid. So I knew that was never going to be a real option, and I forced myself to squeeze my mic into the luggage. And so, here we are today. As I lay in the guest bedroom over the garage with a faithful dog at my feet, I finished reading Peter Zeihan's second book, The Absent Superpower. By the way, it's highly likely during the course of this video, I'm going to confuse that title with Zeihan's first book, The Accidental Superpower. Those names are way too similar and I constantly mix them up. That first book was focused on explaining geopolitics in general, and then explaining why the US was in such a fortunate position in the world. I did a whole video on it, so go listen to that one too. I need the views. But this second book is all about energy, and what the quest for it is likely to do to the nations of the world. The first 3 chapters are a primer on how the US oil shale industry is developing in 2017. And it was really boring, and it made me doubt I would finish this book. I pushed through, and the next few chapters explain Zeihan's expectations for the 3 likeliest conflicts to come, as a result of the US letting the Bretton Woods system fall apart. Then he goes into detail about the world's different regions and how they're going to fare under the new normal, and that got a lot more interesting. I will say, as boring as the shale discussion was, it was certainly educational. As I am also a regular reader of Zero Hedge's Doom and Gloom, I see fairly regular articles about why shale is dying or dead and the whole industry is going to be gone in 5 years and there's no financing left for new shale development and so on and so forth. It's all just a Ponzi scheme. Well, after reading those 3 chapters, I understand why a lot of the criticism of shale is invalid. For instance, rig count is a common measure for activity in the oil industry. More rigs implies more production, and that implies a growing industry. Well, shale companies have been reporting declining rig counts for years, and the doomers will point to this as a sign that the industry is in decline. It turns out, though, that the technology has changed. Rig count is a good metric for the old type of oil production, where you're sticking a pipe deep into an underground reservoir and relying on that natural pressure to push your oil or gas up. However, shale companies have figured out how to drill different levels from the same rig. You could draw your oil from several different quote-unquote wells, and I mean wells as in drilled layers into the shale, into a single rig, and then collect it from there. You have less rigs because you need less rigs. Not to mention that shale companies are more mature after so many years of operations. They've built out their infrastructures. They don't need to buy as much pipe or water or sand or employ as many drivers as they used to because they can rely on the construction of past years. Pointing to their slowing spending isn't a valid data point to use to claim that the industry is in decline. The shale industry is maturing and evolving, but to say it's dying is just selling doomer porn. Zeihan brings up shale because this is transforming the U.S. energy situation, and that is going to have political knock-on effects all over the world. In short, U.S. shale development leads to U.S. energy independence. That energy independence contributes to the U.S. losing interest in the international arena. So the U.S. disengages from the world, recalling troops from many places and becoming more of a mercenary type ally, and hence the book's title, The Absent Superpower. Now, don't make the mistake of thinking this means isolationism. Zeihan isn't forecasting a world where the US has no international relations or never gets involved with other countries. What he's saying is that the US will stop imposing order everywhere. No more protecting the seas for all nations, no more wars to bring stability to nations or anything like that. The US will get involved when it suits US interests, and when it doesn't, we'll probably just ignore it. So this is going to create space for nations to fuck each other's shit up. And he's called out three likely sources of international conflict. The first is a European-Russian war. Russia has indefensible geography, and they aren't satisfied with being vulnerable. So they're going to strike out to create safer borders for themselves. Notice what has been going on with Ukraine for the last few years. Zeihan expects Russia will push into Europe, and some European nations will ally to fight them off. I won't ruin the surprise and tell you which nations ally. The other trouble spot is an obvious one, a war between Iran and Saudi Arabia. And doesn't it kind of feel like we're already seeing that pre-war setup now? Well, with the US disengaging from the Middle East, that war is getting closer. Zeihan discusses a lot of different scenarios and sizes up the destructive capabilities of the two sides. The third war is an extension of the first two, but mostly the Iran-Saudi war. Zeihan calls this the tanker war, and it will be fought between the Northeast Asian nations over the need to secure their energy supplies. This part of the world is highly developed, wealthy, and energy poor, and they import a huge portion of their energy supply. With Iran and the Saudis duking it out, it's going to be a huge problem to get oil shipped from that region. Plus, if Russia really does go to war, that's going to disrupt shipments coming out of there. Oil will be in short supply, and the nations with the least of it will still need it. Eventually, war will break out because one side will want to beat out the other to secure the remaining supply. In this discussion, Zeihan covers the likely belligerents and what he expects to happen to the Asian nations surrounding them. Who will benefit and who will suffer. In none of this discussion, though, does Zeihan ever make a prediction about who will come out the victor. He's focused on the conflict and the attendant challenges and opportunities that will result from them. At the end of the book, Zeihan talks about the US and Latin America. He gives his thoughts on how US policy will change in the future. No more Pax Americana, or actually, as he writes, the Bretton Woods system is going to come to an end. Like I said before, it's going to be a more mercenary America who is only going to care about what America is getting. After reading all this, do I buy it? Well, it feels like Zeihan is going to be right. War between Iran and Saudi Arabia is just obvious. They're itching for a war, and as the US removes more and more forces from the Middle East, nothing will be there to hold them back. A Russia-Europe war? I can't really see it today, but I can once the EU falls apart, and everyone expects that's coming. To be honest, the tanker war is the one that I find least likely. I mean, maybe I'm just being naive, but if we're talking about a future where the US can produce more than it needs, why wouldn't we be itching to sell some of that to Japan? Why wouldn't the US run oil tankers across the Pacific? Natural gas is an excess supply here. In a crazy high-priced future, wouldn't LNG shipping to Japan be economically viable, if not actually lucrative? All that would obviate the need for the tanker war. I suppose Zeihan could say that the price shock and supply disruption from the Persian Gulf would be too sudden for the US to make up that demand. That's fair. I mean, pipelines and oil transfer stations and tanker ports take years to build. I guess the other criticism out there about Zeihan's forecast could be a shift away from oil and nat gas, since this book is so heavily focused on how oil availability will drive other effects in international relations, but I wouldn't call that realistic. Hey, I live in California, so I hear about solar and wind constantly, but that energy takes up a lot of physical space to generate and isn't steadily available. Battery technology sucks and hasn't evolved well enough to remedy the intermittent generation of solar and wind. I've read about lots of other schemes to store energy besides batteries, like rock stacking or artificial waterfalls, but none of those ideas are scalable to a national level. Plus, you're still going to need oil for your cars and trucks. Electric cars aren't that popular. And realistically, you can't expect to convert your entire national vehicle fleet in, say, 20 years. But the fact that I'm sitting here contemplating this future and thinking about ways out of it is an endorsement of this book. You should read it just to get yourself thinking about the possibilities. It should be clear that the U.S. is less and less interested in maintaining the international order, so you should be expecting things to change in the years ahead. Zeihan is giving you some valuable facts and interesting forecasts from a mostly energy lens. It's worth a read if you want to be informed on the state of the world. Yes, even the boring first 3 chapters. You'll learn way more about how the shale industry operates in there than I've seen anywhere else. If you actually want to speak intelligently about energy and the oil industry today, take your medicine, read those chapters. So, in the end, yes, I think it's worth reading this book. You know, if you're into this kind of nerdy political stuff. But yeah, that's it. Once I head back home from my trip here to LA, I'll probably pick up another book. Honestly, I'm not sure which one yet, but oh well. I'll just have to decide later. But yeah, thanks for listening. Like, comment, subscribe, especially comment too. I mean, I am doing this channel because I'm hoping to interact with people, who are interested in these books as well. So please feel free to, just write something down below. And that's it for me. All you have a great day.